Assalamu alaikum, and this is Shirley with Spirit of Water. And before I'll get to the topic of this episode, which you've seen by the clickbait, is Nelson Mandela's chart. And a little bit over the context for this episode. So, for those of you who may not know, I'm half Dutch, half Israeli. That was born and raised in Israel. And we currently have a double genocide in the region. I know it's absolutely not the only genocide around, but this is taking the attention. And since Mercury entered Scorpio, I have had multiple injustice sensitivity. And so I have taken the time to look at Nelson Mandela as the voice of reason to balance my psyche. Basically, so this is a moon day and a Mars hour, a soon to be sun hour. Mars is also ruling the ascendant in 10 degrees Aries, with Mars in the 8th house in Scorpio. Doing not much, actually. Is applying to oppose Jupiter. Jupiter is already on the 11th degree, and this deserves the entire segment of the 11th degree, and talking about between suicide ideation to death with dignity, deserve an entire episode, which I will do. I'm kind of gathering information at the same. It's a very relevant thing to anybody who's living in our region. As you know, the people who died were dying by atrocities and torture. So death with dignity is a topic, and it's a global topic. It's not just a local topic, so I will address it. Other than that, the moon is in the 18 degrees Aquarius, with Saturn in the 12th house in Pisces. So moon is applying to square Uranus and separating from a square to Jupiter. It does sextile, separating from a sextile to Chiron. So the wound of sovereignty got to be tended to. Rahu is conjuncting Aries, ongoing thing. Venus in Virgo, and Sun in 29 degrees of Libra, trining Saturn, sextile in Lilith, about to ingress into Scorpio and reconjunct Mercury. Mercury still bees at 2 degrees Scorpio, dredging up every taboo and every grudge we didn't even know we have and purging it. So I decided to take the time and look at the chart Mandela. And Palestine, he was the only reasonable person who said something of Israel has the right to exist and defend its borders. Not that it's relevant now that they are selling the entire world to Schwab. And at the same time, Palestine has the right to exist and defend its borders. But the only thing, he was pro returning the Golan Heights, which I think is a beautiful place. And yeah, it's difficult emotionally. Nice hills. It's also important for the security regarding boots on ground, so it's not very secure to give the entire mountain area out when you form a country, although most of the battles by air and chemical stuff. And yeah, so this is Nelson Mandela's chart. Ascendant on 23 degrees of Sagittarius, degrees away from my midheaven, with Rahu 20 degrees of Sagittarius. So is Rahu where I have Keto but different faces. Venus on the 22nd degree of Gemini. I don't know his entire life story in terms of like a spousal relationship, but this can mean a sister or a partner or a spouse even that could be killed. So yes, Taurus is his 6th house. It could also be enemy or pet, but yeah, this is what it is. And Venus is conjoining Ketu. It means that partnership for him and even spousal relationship could be very karmic, something that was in past life. Just something I noticed. He has Jupiter in Cancer in the 8th house, Pluto in the 8th house in 5 degrees, and the Sun on 25 degrees Cancer on Procyon. Okay? Sun sextile in Moon, it's an appliant aspect, which is a beautiful, trining, sorry, which is a beautiful aspect to have. It genuinely means that there is something very resilient about your ability to, the right eye and the left eye agree. This is literally what it means, because Sun and Moon rules your left and right eye. So the right eye and left eye agree. And usually it means your parents have some sort of a compatibility with them. It doesn't mean anything, my Moon and Sun sextile, and I have some family story. But it does mean that there is some compatibility there that gives the native more emotional resilience. Okay, they can be confident emotionally, at least from this aspect. And the Sun on Procyon. Now, when did I mention Procyon? I mentioned Procyon when I talked about JFK's chart, who had the midheaven and Saturn engulfing Procyon. And what did he do? He avoided the nuclear holocaust in the Cuban nuclear missile crisis. And now Nelson Mandela also had his son, this by the way on the midheaven of the state of Israel, but his son on Procyon gives us a person that can avoid violence, that can avoid violent conflict, that can support avoiding wars, that can support non-violence, that can stand for truth by his merit of supporting non-violence. This is the more I understand Procyon, the more I understand this, because Procyon has the ability to denucleify the world, like literally, because it tends to the inner core things. It's a very interesting fixed star that I call on a lot, and it has the ability to tend to the core level of a conflict and thereby avoiding a conflict, not by swiping it under the rug, but by facing it, and in a way, and tending to the needs of the people in the conflict. Okay, and this is why with the Sun here, Nelson Mandela was able to speak up about what nearly nobody was able to speak up for, and to think with clarity, and to not neglect the needs of any of the sides that he was speaking about. Okay, this is a very potent placement. That being said, Pluto, Jupiter, and the Sun in Cancer are in the 8th house, with the Moon in the 12th. Okay, ruler of the 8th in the 12th. This means the transformations for his life, and even very intimate partnership, not just romantic, but also with people, or even political relations, because of the placement of Pluto, can form through experiences of isolation, hospitalization, or exile, which unfortunately was what happened. He was serving time in jail for civil disobedience to the apartheid regime in Africa. And the ruler of the ascendant is in the 8th house. This means that he was destined to go through deep transformations that unfortunately in his case included exile. Rahu, but his ruler is actually closer to Ketu. So, spiritual life, and I don't mean religion, I mean spiritual understanding and experiences have been a very integral part of his literally everyday life. And he could speak up against atrocities by the merit, I believe, of this Procyon, the merit of seeing things clearly, and because he's tending to the Procyon has the ability to basically give you the protection that you get. You are safe to speak your ground when you take other people's interest into account, okay? And other people's interest is survival, okay? It's just to live. And therefore, Procyon is able to keep nuclear crisis from happening, is able to denucleify crisis at every level, is a very, very powerful protection. And the more I learn about this, both on mundane and a personal level, the more I understand how powerful it is. Even if you don't have a personal planet on Procyon, you can call on Procyon, and you can form relations with it, and you can gain its wisdom and petition it. And I highly recommend it, especially at the time that we are now living in. Okay? So what else do we see here? Well, his moon, which is in exile, is ruled by Mars, and this Mars is in the 11th house in Libra, conjunct in Lilith. Mars sextiles Saturn and Mercury. Now, when the ruler of the 12th is in the 11th, it means that this person gained publicity by these isolated experiences. Okay, it's a person who goes through exile, goes through whether hospitalization or jailing, in his case jailing, and from there he becomes a public figure, he becomes known. So this is a person who could not be imprisoned in silence, unlike what happens in most cases, unfortunately. It's a person that you will hear from if you so dare to put him in exile. He will speak from exile. And he did. The sextile between Mars and Saturn gives us a persona where drive and durability meet. Although this Mars is in Libra, and Mars in Libra is very indecisive, okay? When Mars was just transiting Libra, I remember I couldn't even decide between a dollar lipstick. I was trying all the lipsticks and I didn't buy a lipstick even though it was $1 purchase. That was Mars in Libra for me. And that's how indecisive Mars in Libra can get. But Mars and Saturn, Mars is drive, and Saturn is longevity of an action, okay? Together is longevity of an action. If this is a crisis, a conflict, like a square, then this is the longevity is of the conflict, okay? So it's a long conflict. But if this is a sextile or a trine, then this is actually a harmonious relationship, is being able to act with durability. Okay, so it's still a Mars in Libra. It can still be indecisive. Yes, the non-violence aspect of Mars, it can also be passive aggressive, but the non-violent of Mars in Libra, well, without Sun on Procyon, it could be completely different. But if we adjoin Sun on Procyon, then we get the compatibility of being indecisive about striking a conflict, and the desire for non-violence or for a non-violent solution. Civil disobedience is very much beginning to form with this. Although it doesn't in itself denote civil disobedience. Okay, the moon. The moon squares Saturn and Mercury, and it squares Uranus. So, in wider orbs, Uranus is on 26 degrees retrograde Aquarius. So it is in the sign of the revolution, but it's not compatible so much with the moon here is not strong. The moon is in Scorpio, and the only support it gets is from the sun in Procyon, but in the 8th house. So this means this person really went through psychological and emotional experiences of survivalism in a very real way. Okay, the square to Saturn, although it's a separating aspect, can give a criticism that he had to endure and could have affected him psychologically. And the square to Uranus gives emotional upheaval and the desire to rebel, but there is a desire to safety or transformation that is at odds with the liberation of humanity ambitions that Uranus in Aquarius has. So while it's a more internal thing, we should also remember this moon is ruling the Sun, Pluto, and Jupiter. So it's also ruling the Sun on Procyon. And so alongside with these desires to have non-violent resistance, there were also conflicting desires and perhaps even conflicting action. It was not all lovey-dovey, or most of the people that we hear, it should be noted that I think it was Malcolm X that was insinuating to rape of white women. We shouldn't, like, this should not go unnoticed, and this war crime, even though committed with nice words, should not go unnoticed. Even when we talk about Black Lives Matters, of course, Black Lives Matters, but then if people are okay with rape, they are okay with rape, and they do not distinct the color of your skin. Do not be fooled. And so that's maybe a taboo topic to talk about, but hey, read the freaking, read that, right? Read what he wrote himself. And so for Nelson Mandela, I don't know, but I do know it was not all lovey-dovey, okay? It was not just like, oh, it's nonviolence and civil disobedience. That was the main tone of the event, but it was not like he was totally not supporting of violence. Which type of violence, I do not know. So this is also important to note. Neptune here is in 6 degrees Leo, again, except for the sextile to Lilith, and the 30 degrees with Pluto. I don't see Neptune doing here very much, but Neptune is in the 9th house, and what it tends to do in the 9th house is to create a certain ideation and devaluation experiences relative to the house and the place where it represents. This one is the Sun on Procyon, and it's the worldview. It could also be academic education, international relations, traveling, and so on and so forth. The conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, that is a difficult one because Mercury is our thought faculties and our speech. Saturn is giving us some challenges and restrictions, but as difficult as it is, it could have avoided him from saying things that perhaps he should not have been saying, especially with the square to the moon here. So the square between Mercury and the moon can mean you feel one thing and you say another, or you have absolutely no filter, and when you speak, it makes even more emotional conflict than when you don't. Which unfortunately can happen also this time with Mercury in Scorpio. So this is the chart. He does have Chiron on Aries, and his lot of fortune, can you pay attention to his lot of fortune on the 18 degrees of Aries? Lot of fortune, and the story of the lots, basically the way we work with lots is we do something called zodiac releasing from the lots. You really have to have the ascendant accurate from that, because the computation of the lot including the ascendant, and that would give us peak times. The lot of fortune, which is par fortuna here, would give us fated events. Now when the lot of fortune is on the 18th degree, understand that those fated events are malefic in nature. I join here degree theory by Nicola Stoyanovich and the lots that is from, I think, I know it from Hellenistic astrology, but since they also have the Arabic lots, so I assume it was not originating there, or at least not staying there alone. It's considered traditional astrology. It doesn't mean that you will get only bad from these bad events. It can also mean that there are some good things resulting from this bad event. But it does mean that the prediction is that his fortune, okay, his fate is like, this will happen to you in life, okay? And what will happen, we don't know. We're going to have an event happening here. Is it good? We don't know, okay? But if it is, if the entire lot is on the 18th degree, it kind of gives us a bit more gloomy, more malefic type of incidents that could happen. Again, perhaps. So let's go to our beloved Wikipedia. Oh, what I said, but without the natal chart. Mandela, thank you. Okay. Nelson Rolilala Mandela, I hope I was pronouncing it right, born Rolilala Mandela. He was born 18 July 1918 and died in 5 December 2013. South African anti-apartheid activist and politician who served as the first president of South Africa from 1994 to 1991. He was the country's first black head of state and the first elected in fully representative democratic election. His government focused on dismantling the legacy of apartheid by fostering racial reconciliation. Reconciliation is a very Procyon word. Ideologically, African nationalist and socialist, served as president of African National Congress ANC from 1991 to 1997. But that, of course, was not the main life events for him. As we know, alma mater from University of Fort Hare, University of London, University of South Africa, and University of Witwatersrand. He was activist, lawyer, philanthropist, and politician, resisting apartheid, of course. Plenty of awards. Usually they give peace awards to like Hitlers and stuff, but this time I guess it was even a broken clock is correct twice a day, so the clock was correct in his case probably. Xhosa. Mandela was born into Thembu royal family. Okay, so he was royal in descent. I actually did not. I wonder if Sun in the 8th house could denote a person who is royal in descent. I didn't think about this because 8th house is also the intergenerational stuff that we have, and Sun is royalty, but I don't know. Then maybe you can tell me. So you see, he was born royal in Mvezo, South Africa. He studied law in University of Fort Hare and University of Witwatersrand before working as a lawyer in Johannesburg. There he became involved in anti-colonial and African nationalist politics, joining the ANC in 1943 and co-founding Youth League in 1944. After the National Party's white-only government, think how silly is that? White-only government. Okay. Established apartheid, a system of racial segregation that privileged whites. Mandela and the ANC committed themselves to its overthrow. He was appointed president of the ANC's Transvaal branch, rising to prominence for his involvement in the 1952 Defiance campaign and 1955 Congress of the People. He was repeatedly arrested for seditious activities and was unsuccessfully prosecuted in the 1956 treason trial. Influenced by Marxism, he secretly joined the banned South African Communist Party, SACP, although initially committed to non-violent protest. In association with the SACP, he co-founded the militant Umkhonto, it's like junta probably, Vesizwe in 1961. This is Junto Zizwe. Zizwe sounds to me like a bit Polish. Like I wasn't expecting. I don't know the languages, the local languages, but I was like, oh, it reminds me a bit of Polish. And led a sabotage campaign against the government. Well, of course, if you're going to overthrow an oppressive regime, you need the military. Okay. He was arrested and imprisoned in 1961, and following the Rivonia trial was sentenced to life imprisonment for conspiring to overthrow the state. This is an actually important discussion. Most of the propaganda that you get in regarding to non-violent resistance is actually not true, and rape and torture is not resistance. Okay. So you have to both understand the fact that a revolt is violent. Okay, you're probably not going to get it all done by fasting, and if you do, you are basically committing a war crime against your people because you're forcing them to die in hunger. So yes, a revolt is violent. That being said, when it comes to like raping and torturing people, beheading people, sacrificing weird rituals, babies and stuff, this is no longer resistance, and it's not outthrowing of anything. Now you are doing oppression. So there is this prayer regarding aggression, saying, may the Lord lend me to know when to use aggression and in what measure to use aggression and when to stop using aggression. Mars matures the 28th for a reason. And so this is important to not gaslight ourselves that there is such a thing as purely non-violent release from colonialism, as well as not gaslight ourselves that the people who rape, behead children and torture people and the people who support them and participate in this act are in any way releasing you from any oppression. They do not. Okay, they are your next oppressors. So this is about, a lot of people will be liberating themselves, not from regimes in as much as from what's coming. Okay, if you think about Agenda 2030, then the entire world would need to do revolts, and there's no such thing as non-violent revolts, but also it's not about raping and torturing people and beheading babies and whatnot. It's like, that's not what will liberate you. That being said, do not fool yourself that a liberation is non-violent, because you're just going to be violent to your people. It's really fucking scary, but it's also an important discussion to have, because if we give the message to the world that it's all going to be, non-violence, and we're going to strike hunger and starve our people, and somebody's going to give a flying fuck, this is not going to yield any freedom to anybody. That being said, if people go to the flip side of saying that all is well, it's just as long as you're liberating something, these dead babies are not standing in your path to freedom, okay? And these dead babies do not bring freedom closer to you either, okay? Nor do these raped men and women. Verstehst du? Okay? Capito? So, Mandela served 27 years in prison. This is an entire Saturn cycle. And Saturn is not even ruling his 12th house, nor his 8th house. Can I go to the chart back and see why was he serving a Saturn cycle in prison? Wow. Okay, well, yeah, he has his... No, this is the chart of the day. Why? Like, why? Saturn is in the 9th house, according to this. And the Sun is in the 8th house. Do you see something that I don't? 27 years is an entire Saturn cycle. If this chart is correct, I'm not going to try to release from the lots, because even if I did, like, no. Oh my God. No, 8th house is trauma, but imprisonment is the 12th, and it's very indirect. You see, the connection is like the Sun is the ruler of Saturn, and the Moon is the ruler of the Sun in the 12th house. But I still don't get, like, from this particular thing, I absolutely don't get 27 years in prison. I'm sorry, I don't know how to delineate this. Okay, the Saturn is in the 9th house. It is ruling the 2nd and the 3rd. Yes, its ruler is in the 8th house, but then nada. Okay, it squares the Moon in the 12th, sextiles Mars, but like, either we don't have the right ascendant. I don't know if it's like the data is DD, so it can be that but we don't have the right ascendant. Okay, because this is not a chart that I see 27 years in prison. Is, God forbid, I have Saturn ruling the 12th house. Okay. I have Pisces ascendant, so God forbid if the person has Pisces ascendant and they get imprisonment. This is a person that could do a Saturn cycle in prison. Hopefully not, but it's like Saturn is ruling that 12th house, and you can say it's triggering a 27-year cycle of stuff like that. I don't know, like, and like he has the Moon there, Mars is ruling, if this is the case. So this is giving me some reason to believe that either there are some lots to do with imprisonment that can give like long-term imprisonment, and mind you, I won't delve into this right now, or I don't have the right ascendant, which with the DD classification it can be, because I don't see from this chart 27 years in prison. I know he served long time in prison, but 27 is Saturn takes 28 years, so it means that only when Saturn matured, and it's not even an outer planet that's there, because Neptune is in the 9th, Pluto is in the 8th, but 8 is a lot of things. It's not necessarily imprisonment. Is 12th house, okay? Is 12th house. So something very interesting here. And Uranus is also like in the 3rd house. No, in the 2nd house. In the 3rd house. So it's not coming from any of those. Unless, like, and it's not even an outer planet transit. Because if Scorpio is his 12th house, then Pluto takes the slowest time in Scorpio when it was not a Pluto in Scorpio. Okay? That triggered this. So I have no, it's probably not the right ascendant. Split between Robben Island, Portsmouth Prison, and Victor Verster Prison. So, several prisons. Amid growing domestic and international pressure and fears of racial civil war, President F.W. de Klerk released him in 1990. Mandela and de Klerk led efforts to negotiate an end to apartheid, which resulted in 1994 multiracial general election, in which Mandela led an ANC to victory and became president. I'm called to tell you, I was talking about use of violence in liberation from oppression. And I want to say something more about why do I say that sexual boundary violation and is not something that we want to touch or do. It's not just like, oh, it is a horrid thing, okay? Scorpio rules the sexuality and these types of crimes as well. And what is Scorpio most notable for? It's a fixed water sign. It means that when you are liberating yourself, what your desire is that you will exist. You're seeking to erase. Okay? Let's say even Klaus Schwab. I'm not seeking for him to be erased from the planet. I'm seeking for me to exist safely. For as long as he allows it, I have no problem. Ganz genau? And so when you're seeking to, let's say, liberate yourself from colonialism, you're not seeking to destroy the motherland of, let's say, the British. Okay, you are seeking to gain independence. Okay? And that means, this is why I'm very, very concerned about people that put, right now the Israel-Palestine is popping, but that put Palestine on the entire region of Israel, just like the Eretz Israel Shlema that is calling to Israel from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea to I don't know, Iraq, is not good, is fundamentalist. Just like this, putting all of Israel as Palestine is signaling that you are becoming a Hitler, okay? And this is not what we want to achieve. What we want to achieve is something pragmatic where there's a place for me, there is a place for you, and I just want to be independent, okay? You're growing from the thrones, the chains of oppression, to become sovereign. And this is why you think about the day after the revolution. The day after the revolution, your people are supposed to come to our hotels and our cafes, and our people are supposed to be sent to vacation in your hotels and your cafes, okay? You think about Israelis in a Zimmer in Österreich and in Germany, and Germans coming to the Dead Sea to treat their skin disorders. This is what happens the day after the revolution. Mind you, there was a Holocaust. Okay, I'm not even speaking of apartheid. It was a genocide. Okay, not a racial genocide. Okay, and look at the relations of Israel and Germany post the war. And so when you are liberating yourself, of course you can't be like non-violent. Of course people die. Of course war is not a nice thing. And of course, if people put you in a situation, it's either you or them, it's understand that they have to go. That being said, when you're doing something like rape, torture, touching on like pregnant women, beheading babies, mutilating the bodies of people, okay, that is creating long-term baggage that is very difficult to get rid of through generations, because these are children for whom this happened to one of their parents or their siblings. And I want to tell you, when I was in Hebron for basically a one voice journey, okay, it was One Voice Israel to meet One Voice Palestine, and we were in Hebron, and there is a street called Tarpat, which is basically the 1936 Arabic rebellion. And at that time in Hebron, there were 70 Jews living, just 70 Jews, and just like in Poland, they were all slaughtered one day. I'm not talking about even 7th of October. Here's two regions, like people, Arabs and Jews living together. All is fine, all is well. One sudden day, 70 people, the entire community was slaughtered. I was traveling there and that happened in 1936. Okay, so yes, there's the name of the street, but I was traveling there at about 2000, 2013, 2014, okay? And the Jewish people living in Hebron, they spoke to me like this happened yesterday. They were genuinely fearing their neighbors like this happened yesterday. And all the while, you see a Palestinian person kind of like, come on, if we want to walk to your villages, we can walk by foot. But if I want to buy at the grocery store, I have to go through 6 cops. My mother has to go with the shopping bag through 6 cops. But if I really wanted to do something, I could walk by foot. Okay? But that Jewish person that was about his 40s or his 50s, he remembers this as though it happened when he was alive, as though it happened yesterday. Okay, he is speaking to me as like a child of a Holocaust survivor. You know, a Holocaust survivor, he remembers what happened to him or her, and he's like, I want to move on. But the children take it so even more difficult than the parents. Okay, the second generation, they're even more affected than the parents, because the parents like, I survived this, I moved on, I raised children, I continue on with my life. But the children, because a child grows into the world believing, you have a safe family, safe this, safe that, and then you learn about the story of what happened to some of your family, and you're shocked, and you will see a person, whether it's a Polish or a Palestinian, or for Palestinian, a Jewish person. Okay, this works both way, and you will be terrified. This is why, yes, people are getting killed in revolutions. That being said, if the issue is like, okay, now we have our territory, we had to establish ourselves, it's very sad that we had to fight for it, it's very silly, but maybe they were thinking that we are going to conquer them, which is why it's so dangerous to put this entire region of Palestina as Palestine. Okay, and you raise the Israeli flags, you're dredging up the Holocaust trauma. Okay, people in Israel speak about what happened as a Holocaust. When people are busy in their own Holocaust, it's very difficult to have the leeway to see the other genocide. Okay, and it's true that it's true both ways, but if you're erasing the entire entity of this country, you're triggering up the Hitler sentiment. Okay, now that Jewish people feel they need a living space for the Jews, and if they see that other in places abroad they are drawing stars of David and threatening Jews around the world, it's like, it's what, nowhere is safe for us. So what do we have to do? We must conquer land. We must destroy our enemy, and everything is kosher. Okay, this is why when we talk about liberation, we want to be as pragmatic as possible, and we definitely don't want to overcreate traumas in our opponent, because we will have to live side by side to these people. Okay? It's very difficult. It's not for nothing that a person like Nelson Mandela, who was not only royal, but served 27 years in prison and was leader of the revolution, had son on Procyon, because it takes this Procyonic persona to lead an actual successful release from apartheid. Okay, he was successful. I don't think that torturing children and beheading people and torturing and mutilating their bodies while they are dying and after they are dying, I don't think that would lead into the liberation that is aspired to. And it's a shame that I have to say that, but while I don't want to gaslight people about non-violence, blah, blah, blah struggle, I also don't want to gaslight people to think that instigating deep trauma inside your opponent is somehow conducive to freedom, liberation, live and let live. Okay, and that's very important. Um, so I'm called to speak about this, and to learn from what is successful, what is not successful. Okay, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to end up. Your children are going to end up in the same international school as their children. Granted that you're both going to be successful, well, you're both going to study in Oxford or Harvard, okay? And you're both going to need, even I'm a Me Too veteran from academia, and even me, I said I take a break from academia, and I did not say I will never set foot in academia, because I don't know. If Howard decides to give me a place of honor, then I will have perhaps my requirements, or I will decide to do an insider job and change system from within, okay? But eventually, at the end of the day, I know that the day after the revolution, if I have children, or my siblings' children, they will sit with their siblings' children, and they will go to the cafeteria together, and I want them to have a good life together. You don't want to go through intergenerational perpetual yuck like what's going on in Israel and Palestine. Okay? Learn from Mandela. Invoke Procyon. Because those things, Masons, not Masons, at the end of the day, those things are going to affect your future. Even within the Masonic people, what do you think? It is only one type of people who support only one type of things? No. There are different people with different opinions. Even if they are in the Masons or in the Illuminati. There are different people who support different things. And we also need to remember this. So, leading a broad coalition government which promulgated a new constitution, Mandela emphasized reconciliation between the country's racial groups and created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate past human rights abuses. Economically, his administration retained his predecessor's liberal framework, despite his own socialistic belief, also introducing measures to encourage land reform and combat poverty and expand healthcare system. Internationally, Mandela acted as mediator in the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing trial and served in the Secretary General of the Non-Aligned Movement from 1998 to 1999. He declined a second presidential term and was succeeded by his deputy Thabo Mbeki. Mandela became an elder statesman and focused on combating poverty, HIV, or AIDS through the charitable Nelson Mandela Foundation. He was a controversial figure for much of his life. Although critics on the right denounced him as a communist terrorist, and those on the far left deemed him too eager to negotiate and reconcile. Okay, what people call normalization. Okay, it's the acquisition of normalization with apartheid supporters. He gained international acclaim for his activism. Globally regarded as an icon of democracy and social justice, he received more than 250 honors, including Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, like I said, even the broken clock is correct twice a day. This was the one time that the broken clock was correct. It was with Nelson Mandela. I hope to not be disillusioned. He is held in deep respect with South Africa, where he is often referred to by his Tembu clan name, Madiba, and described as the father of the nation. Okay, Sun on Procyon with Cancer. Cancer is the people. Sun, father of the nation, the father of the people. Okay, Sun is very good. If you think about a royal figure, then Sun in Cancer it can be very good, because Cancer is ruling the people, and Sun is a person who's genuinely father for the people, or that genuinely cares for the people. Of course, the risk is it could be too patriarchal, but the connection between the royal figure and the people is very neat here, is very good. So, early life. Mandela was born on 18 July 1918 in the village of Mvezo in Umtata. then part of South Africa's Cape Province. Given the forename Rolilala, a Xhosa term colloquially meaning, I would really like the input of an African here. Like, I'm probably going to get roasted for how I try to pronounce it. So, if you are a regional African from these tribes and locations, I would like really be happy for your comment and corrections. Meaning troublemaker. I like this. In later years, he became known by his clan name Madiba. His patrilineal great-grandfather, Ngubenguka. Oh wow, the consonants so stressed together reminds me of German. It's completely different pronunciation than German, but you have a lot of consonants stressed together. So it's almost like a mirror picture with the languages. I wonder what the historic relations between the languages. Because this is interesting. Sorry, a linguist. Pardon my linguist. Was a ruler of Tembu Kingdom in Transkeian, territories of South Africa's modern Eastern Cape Province. One of the Ngubenguka's sons, named Mandela, was Nelson's grandfather and the source of his surname. Because Mandela was the king's child by a wife of the Ihiba clan, a so-called left-hand house. What is left hand? I know in magic there is like the left-hand path and right-hand path. I wonder if it's anything to do with this. The descendants of his cadet branch of the royal family were morganatic, ineligible to inherit the throne, but recognized as hereditary royal counselors. This is interesting. Because I think about if there was not apartheid, Nelson Mandela would never get to be a leading figure. Okay, but because the regime was not local, Mandela, who was a part of royalty, became a leading figure. So there is something interesting, before that, when I heard about him being royal, in Europe, when there was the French Revolution and the period of Enlightenment and so on, then there was the question of, are you loyal to the kingship, okay, the kingship institution? And so if you were considered supporter of the king by the rebels, this was very bad. And even thinkers like Hobbes were criticized for being supportive of the king. Okay, Leviathan by Hobbes, philosophy of politics, a social contract philosophy. And so I just couldn't help but thinking that if he would be in Europe because he was royal, then it was not the apartheid that would bother people so much, even though they could be peasants, but actually the fact that he would be more close to the king and people wanted to overthrow the king. And I had this thought in my mind, but now that I read that he was not eligible to inherit the throne, I cannot help but thinking about the crazy circumstance where his region was no longer kingly, and so the combination of the East and West created a leader that was unnatural for the hereditary tradition of his region in Africa, and given rejuvenation to Africa by the merit of this struggle. Because kingship, if you think about kingship, it was a necessary progress from hereditary regimes, which is also having its pros and cons, to the more what we call it democratization or civil involved regimes, and it's like as horrid as apartheid was, the West introduced non-hereditary regimes to Africa, which was in the scales more important to discontinue the hereditary kingship and and then to go through this crisis where we would bring about an actual equity of the, I don't know what to call it, democracy, but you know what I call it, the civil involved regime type, more civil involved regime type than, let's say, kingship. And Mandela was a mediatory figure that had royal hereditary, but was also not of the throne inheritors. So he was kind of like in the midst of this, bridging in the kingship, the West, the desire to have more civil involved regimes. Now, I don't know the first thing about Africa, so I don't know if when Africa had kings, it was like the West, or was it more civil involved regimes to begin with, and I'm just projecting. So again, if you are of this region, maybe know elderly people from this region, if you could tell me or make video response, then I would be very honored, because I have this missing and I would like to hear it from actual people rather than rumors about what Africa was from like white people, which is not going to give me the correct information probably. So yeah, Nelson Mandela's father, Gadla Henry, Mfakaniswa Mandela, 1880 to 1928, was a local chief and counselor to the monarch. He was appointed to position in 1915 after his predecessor was accused of corruption by governing white magistrate. In 1926, Gadla was also sacked for corruption, but Nelson was told that his father had lost his job for standing up to the magistrate unreasonable demands. Okay, so he got it from his father to kind of stand your ground in front of the monarch, if I'm getting it right. Okay, so this proves to me what I began to say. A devotee of the god Kwamata, God, wait, I'm sorry, I have to understand who is this god. He was the most prominent god among the Xhosa-speaking people of southeastern Africa. Kama is the creator and protector of heaven and earth. Kamata is the all-knowing and omnipresent God in the third dimension. Oh, so it's like it's by dimension? This is so cool. In the second dimension lives ancestors who ceased to be in the physical realm. Oh, by us, I think with I don't know, like esoterics that I heard like from Jews, is we have, let's say this is third dimension, and then fourth dimension. It's like fourth dimension is like in between worlds, okay, and fifth dimension is 5D is like I think spirits, or like the spirit world, and then sixth dimension is God. So for us, six is the dimension of God, at least for the esoteric that I learned from a colleague who is doing mediumship. But yes, fourth dimension is like the in-between worlds, and not necessarily the ancestors, or some ancestors go into the fourth dimension to communicate, but there could be also kind of like confused souls, or souls that are like in a process, or maybe people that had trauma that's healed into process. So when you channel, you basically are supposed to do it from like, if you're believing in that one, then you're supposed to do it from like the sixth dimension, and if you do mediumship, I think they come from the fifth dimension. So it's very interesting to hear about, like, there's the third, and then underneath, like the second, it's kind of like the underworld is the dimension of the ancestors. So I'm just thinking about the differences of where do you bring the ancestors from, which is interesting to see. Let's see. It is believed during the existence in the physical world and by the instruction of Komata, ancestors created spiritual entities that would be responsible for guiding human life on Earth. So the ancestors create spiritual entities. It's not the ancestors, but they are creating spiritual entities to do so. Wow. Humans may not see them, but they appear spiritually in dreams, or a chosen person sees them in the day. They appear in the form of figures a human can physically recognize, like a fish, snake, lion, or bee. These entities exist separately from the creatures which they possess. Oh, and have a clear identity of their own. So you would have like a spirit, and then the spirit captures an animal, and then it gets your attention through the animal, but then the spirit can go out of the animal. It's like shape shifting. If I get it right. So the intended existence was not only guidance, but also a form of communication between the physical and spiritual realms. So I'm not going to go, I'm finding it very interesting, but I want to stick to the topic as much as I can. So yeah, Nelson's mother was Gadla's third wife, Nosekeni, Fani, doctor of Nkedama, the right hand house. So it was left hand house, right hand house. I wonder what this is. And a member of the Amapemvu clan of the Xhosa. No one in my family had ever attended school. On the first day of school, my teacher, Miss Medingane, gave each of us English name. This was the custom amongst African in those days, and was undoubtedly due to the British bias of our education. That day, Miss Medingana told me my new name was Nelson. Why this particular name, I have no idea. This is also something, with if I think about Israel and the British Mandate, then yes, a lot of people had British names, but also then we had the ideology of the melting pot. So this ideology, basically, when people came from Africa or from the East or whatnot, they were given like Hebrew names. And it's still happening, like even with people come from Ethiopia, then sometimes they would be given Hebrew names. And it's like the costumes, the divergence of costumes were erased. They wanted to create the Israeli person, the melting pot, which it's like they wanted to create unity, but this is also erasure of identities and costumes and culture, which is a great loss. So I think the melting pot eventually created a lot of grudge and a lot of problems in retrospective. Okay, it was not intended as bad. It was the real desire to have unity in the people, but in retrospective, we understand that this is also psychologically damaging to do such a thing. And so it was done to Jews under the British Mandate, and then when they formed the Jewish country, then they did that to the people who came from the diaspora. Mandela later stated that his early life was dominated by traditional Xhosa costume and taboo. He grew up with two sisters in his mother's kraal in the village of Kunu, where he tended herds as cattle boy and spent much time outside with other boys. Both his parents were illiterate, but his mother, being a devout Christian, sent him to the local Methodist school where he was baptized as Methodist. Mandela was given the English by his teacher. When Mandela was about 9, his father Kuno, where he died of undiagnosed ailment that Mandela believed to be lung disease. Lung disease. Okay. Feeling caught adrift, he later said that he inherited his father's proud rebelliousness and stubborn sense of fairness. Well, son on Procyon, okay? Son is also the father. Mandela's mother took him to the great palace in Mkekesveni. Mkekesveni. It sounds Polish. It's like if you fold up Europe and Africa in about the equator, you kind of like sandwich it. It's like this language and that language sound quite similar. It sounds Polish. My God. Where he was entrusted to the guardianship of the Tembu regent chief John Taba Dalin. Although he did not see his mother again for many years, Jojin Taba and his wife Noengland treated him as their own child, raising him alongside their son Justice and daughter Nomafu. As Mandela attended church services every Sunday with his guardians, Christianity became a significant part of his life. He attended the Methodist mission school located next to the palace, where he studied English, Xhosa, history, and geography. He developed a love of African history, listening to the tales told by elderly visitors to the palace, and was influenced by the anti-imperialist rhetoric of the visiting chief Joyi. Nevertheless, at the time, he considered European colonizers not as oppressors but as benefactors who had brought education and other benefits to Africa. Age 16, he, Justice, and several other boys traveled to Tihalara to undergo the Ulwaluku circumcision ritual that symbolically marked the transition to men. Afterwards, can we abolish circumcision worldwide? Thank you. And the female equivalent of it. Afterwards, he was given the name Dalibunga. And Clarkebury, Hilltown, and Fort Hare, 1934-1940. Intending to gain skills needed to become a privy counselor for the Tembu Royal House, Mandela began his secondary education in 1933 in Clarkebury Methodist School in Nkobo, a Western-style institution that was the largest school for Black Africans in Tembuland. Made to socialize with other students on an equal basis, he claimed that he lost his stuck-up attitude, becoming best friends with a girl. He began playing sports and developing. Now I can relate to him more. I like gardening. He completed his junior certificate in 2 years, and in 1937 he moved to Hilltown, the Methodist College in Fort Beaufort, attended by most Tembu royalty, including Justice. The headmaster emphasized the superiority of European culture and government, but Mandela became increasingly interested in native African culture, making his first non-Xhosa friend a speaker and coming under the influence of one of his favorite teachers, Xhosa, who broke taboo marrying a Soto, which I like, biodiversity. Mandela spent much of his spare time at Hilltown as a long-distance runner and boxer, and his second year he became a perfect. Now, you see how it's not only that he was of royalty, but was not heading to inherit the throne, but also he was breaking a taboo of marrying a person from another tribe, which is healthy for your people's immune system. Okay, interracial marriages degenerate your health. So too. And so there were much needed changes in Africa to begin with, preferably not brought up as like by colonialism, but the that oppressive forces were also liberating from clan and tribe rituals um, and hereditary habits that needed a change. We needed a reformation. So that's not to say that colonialism is good. That's to say that when we don't change within, something from the outside comes and it's like, now there's a crisis, you have to change. Okay, like what's happening in the world right now. It's like countries are not sheltering their homeless, no pride flag in Palestine, and it's not the fault of the people. Okay, it's the oppressors. Are not People are not blamed for being oppressed. To blame for being oppressed. It's like we're not sheltering our people. We're not having gay pride parade in Palestine or Jerusalem, which is no less concerning. We are not tending to a more flexible schedule. We're not tending to, like, even after COVID, taxation is so difficult. Why? Because by now every person must have at least their own ability to give receipts to people that they charge money for their services, whether as a sidekick or as a full-blown business. It's like income has changed. So when we're not doing that as nations, then we have this bubbly thing happening. It's like, well, the nation state has not fulfilled its promise sufficiently. Now either we're going to have a Schwabland with concentration camps, or we're going to create an actual alternative that's better than that. Okay, what does Schwabland do for the world that other things don't do? Well, they probably are going to say to people that they're going to have houses. They talk about the 15-minute city. They're probably going to allure people with housing, with being able to be taken care of when they're refugees. Okay, there's a carrot and the stick here. Right before the 7th of October, Israel and the United States agreed to not necessitate visa from Israeli travelers. Okay, and me listening to see that it's not a siren, and that it's not like a missile siren, and just a casual moment. But at least we don't snake walk yet. So to dodge like mass shooters. So the thing is that how are we being allured into the social credit score? Well, by the promise that we will only need our fingerprint to travel abroad. Okay, and so there's the carrot and the stick here. It's like, what did we neglect as peoples? Why is it not safe for a trans black woman to travel everywhere? Okay, what else does Schwabland do? Well, it gives a lot of people who are of trans society acceptance, but only if they have a gender affirming surgery, which is only compatible with a very particular, very specific, and very limited type of trans people. Okay, there's fluid, there is gender queer, there is genderless, there is two genders or two spirits or two souls, non-conforming, and none of them necessarily. And there are people with gender dysphoria that actually sorted out by practicing body love and embodiment. Like, there are many things, and there are people who go through gender affirming surgeries and do not want to detransition. people are not being informed. And so what we're going to have is basically, well, you're going to get an LGBTQ acknowledgement, but only if you go through a surgery that keeps you tied to the medical healthcare system for like the rest of your life, very intimately, like through your genitals. And so if you would want children, you will need another, you would need the support of another person to be able to have children, or to have children with technology. So now, while it's absolutely gorgeous, like I know kids that were brought by IVF, and IVF allows people to have kids, and it's amazing, and it's a miracle. I also know of the many things that were done so that people will only be able to have a kid by IVF. Okay, and this is where those changes are coming about. They're social, they're political, they tend to our housing, to our food, they tend to many things. And so there is our life form and lifestyle needs to go through a transition of inclusivity. And when we don't do that, either there is colonialism or there is Showa. Okay? LGBTQ? I'm not talking about the 1945 one. I'm talking the 7th of October one. It's like Israel did not house its homeless. Israel did not take care of the LGBTQ. Israel did not take care of like many people. And it became worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until it felt like a betrayal from home. So that is to say, nobody who was murdered is guilty of that. And life needed to change completely. So you see how the clan tribe life, where you have hereditary kingship and you can only marry within your tribe, so you're limiting your gene pool, needed to change. And when it did not happen, there was something from the outside where you had to adjust. And who was the leading person? It was a person that was mediator between the old world and the desired new world, which is not only clans, only marry within the clan, kings are hereditary, la 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 la. No, like, it's not only apartheid that was the problem of Africa before the rise of Nelson Mandela. And he was successful because he was taking what was good in the past, as respect for diversity, as equity, as values of sharing, which people called socialism and communism. It's just the notion community life, in as much as I know. Okay, for you see tribes that live in a community life, then they share with each other, they care for each other. Of course, different tribes, blah 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 blah. But it's the old value of community life, and people call it communism. And you can marry someone from another tribe. Yes, there are these white people living in here. We're not going to kill them all. And not all of them are to blame that they were sent here, maybe even exiled here, maybe with a punishment. Okay? So we're going to get along with them. We're just not going to be disempowered anymore in the face of them, which is, it takes a unique type of person to mitigate all this, and it takes a Procyon placement to be successful. If I go locally to the Israel-Palestine, Israel has its midheaven on Procyon. It would take a Procyonic type of Palestinian to stand up to Israel and achieve the changes needed in the Palestinian society, like where are the women, where are the pride flags. Okay, where is the diversity of religion? There are so many Christians in Palestine. Like, it's not all people are like Islamophobes. Like, so many of them are Christians. Assalamu alaikum. So it takes a Procyonic type of Palestine. Like, if I would look for in a Palestinian leader to like actually represent the people and not with the guerrilla war type of thingy, which I absolutely do not blame the people in. Like, it was orchestrated from outside. We know that, as in many things in the region. And I'm not talking about Israel. Talking Schwabland. But it would actually take a type of a Procyonic persona of the Palestinian people to bring about the desired changes in a way that Palestine could stand strong the day after the revolution, the day after the liberation, whether as Palestine or whatever entity. Okay, and it's about tending to the changes that are needed within. It can't be that the leaders are making millions of dollars and people are starving and being used as, like, the guerrilla people are hiding in between civilians. But this is not a play that, like, this is not a guerrilla that is acting on guerrilla budget. It's a guerrilla that's acting on a Qatari budget, okay? Like, you don't stand to the IDF for no reason. I'm not talking about the 7th of October, which was another type of orchestration. But what I'm talking about, like, this is a guerrilla organization that is budgeted Qatari oil. Okay, it's budgeted gold. It's like legions of gold. Like, it's not a guerrilla budget. And so, but yet it's not acknowledged as an international army. So there is an intricacy to that. But the end result is that you have guerrilla warriors hiding, like, in hospitals, in schools, and creating a lot of controversy, and of course putting it on screen and sending it to the world, and so on. So there's a lot of intricacy going on there. But you can't really say that the people are getting any of that, like, Qatari money, which is supposed to also include food, include education, include healthcare. Like, the type of schools and education and healthcare and agriculture that they could build with this money, all the while protecting these, like, bulletproofing agriculture in Palestine. Like, do you know what could be done with this money for the people? And believe it or not, it would be easier for Israel to step back and be pragmatic when we would deal with more people who are just, like, growing agriculture like us, making startup like us. But like, people like we even look the same. Okay, if I should, if, like, you look at my face, I can pass as Palestinian. If you look at the faces of Palestinian, they can pass as Israeli. Like, internally, when we had struggles, like in the COVID, there were literally a group of people that were assaulting a person, and 2 times it happened that a group of Arabs were assaulting a person they thought was Israeli and was Arab, and that the group of Israelis was assaulting a person they thought was Arab but was Israeli, because we literally look the same. Okay, so and like, I just want you to, like let's hold a moment of silence for all the startups lost, the agricultural projects lost, the securing of these agriculture projects, which they absolutely, like they could literally build an Iron Dome type of structure to support an agricultural permaculture, like, farm, or several farms. And then if you separated several farms, you have decentralization and you secure these places, then you can also begin to, even though you're not an army, separate a little of the guerrilla from the people. And it's like, if the Qatari money was sufficient to arrive at the 7 billion of the leaders, that is something that could be done with the money. You could bulletproof in a hospital with, like, and it's not like they don't know how to do it. Who builds our houses in Israel? Arab people. Okay, so it's not like the knowledge is not there. It's just that the money was blocked from developing Palestine and was developing in underground tunnels that, and it's like all weapon, no structures. So, and whoever wanted to talk with Israel was accused of normalization, as Nelson Mandela was accused during the apartheid regime. Okay, with the difference between apartheid, which is a colonialist structure, and a situation where there were two states. One decided to wipe off the other state, hoping that the Arab world will help them. And the Arab world did Hakait Shalavia, which basically means did not show up to the birthday party and decided to like, hey guys, you got a country, leave us the fuck alone. And that was the war of 1948. And that made it all the more complicated to create anything substantial. Okay, while the people are not to blame, we can definitely see how to actually achieve a successful liberation, whether from colonialism or from occupation or from apartheid. We need to both understand what within our society genuinely needs to evolve. Okay, where do we need to be more inclusive? To include biodiversity. Like if you don't marry outside your clan, this is biodiversity. Like this is a fertile soil for apartheid. Now that I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God. And of course, people are not to blame that they are oppressed. Okay? It's the conjoining of what needs to change in our society to become more inclusive, more liberal, more open. And the understanding that the or else here is very fatalistic, fundamentalistic, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, this has its limitation because we know that in the Middle East, both Iran and a lot of Arabs were very liberal, and that was being that liberalism was being oppressed time and time again until the only buds that were growing were fundamentalist. All the while, there is oil passing freely from Iran to the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. So there is peace. It's just that the people are dying. So we're being completely hoaxed. And we only saw there was a leakage in the Arava region in Israel of oil. There was an oil leakage a couple of days ago that exposed that it's like, where is this oil coming from? Apparently it streams like even from Iran to the Red Sea and to the Mediterranean. So we basically have peace relations when it comes to transforming oil. For those of you who remember 1973, Iran saved Israel. It was not the same regime, saved Israel in the oil embargo, but it did not provide the West with oil, or the West did not want its oil, and so it became popular to be mad at Israel. Before that, you couldn't say a word about the country. After that, you could criticize everything, but you could also, also the sleeping and anti-Semitic bears also woke up, and so you have to sift and sort what is genuine, correct criticism and what is eugenics mumbo jumbo. So it's as intricate, as complicated as it is. What's the takeaway for me from this is, for us, for the world, is to realize where do we need to be more inclusive, tend to that, and understand that it is in our inclusivity, it is in our releasing and even abolishing certain habits that are like genital mutilation in the name of whatever ritual that are outdated, okay? Because traditions change even within themselves. They were meant to change. The world is changing. And how do we tend to our people? Okay, how we stop blaming people for being homeless and start providing them with resources and the conditions and acceptance and validation to think more creatively. How can we make life easier? Because we can, and most jobs are performed in much more efficiency when they're not done with hustle. There are particular people for whom the hustle works. It's not the majority of society. Okay, and even in those cases, it's many cases it's a coping mechanism that when a person reaches a certain age that they can tend to their traumas, they let go of the hustle. And I've seen this happen around me. People were suddenly being able to sleep for a whole night simply because they understood that they were not to blame for their incest. I kid you not. It's that. It's like it's that simple. It's validation. So um, because we are not dealing with whatever like the cards are being pulled of like Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. Let's pull the all of Israel, Palestine. Now they're heading for India again, Taiwan, China, and in Asia or whatnot, and Australia, Philippines, and they're pulling in at your strings of nationality. All the while, we are really dealing with something completely different. We're dealing with the one world country that you're not going to have any rights in. So it's kind of like, what's the lowest denominator of regime in the globe? This is what we're aiming for as humanity right now, okay? What's the lowest denominator? So we really need to raise our freaking frequency to become more inclusive, to understand that this is what is needed, to help each other, and to understand that liberation, while it's not completely nonviolent, cannot be by torturing, raping. It's like we shan't become our oppressor when we come to liberate ourselves. So this is a very important like takeaway for me when I'm looking at the work of Mandela and the story of the liberation from apartheid, which is unfortunately quite unique. And I'm looking at the successful liberation from oppression. Then I'm thinking along the lines of both rebelling our traditions and rebelling what needs to be rebelled, because marrying a person from another clan can literally save your species. If you're intermarriage is if you're intermarrying for so many generations, you're degenerating the race. Like racism is not wrong, it's just about biodiversity and not eugenics. Okay, it's like we can degenerate our race if we are trying to purify our race by not contacting with others. It's actually exposure that that strengthens our bloodlines and our blood system while maintaining will and consent, because will and consent has a very unique power to orient us towards both recovery when recovery is needed and towards healthy relations, health, the health of the land, agriculture, international relations, again, Cleopatra, style. And it wasn't that Cleopatra was just sleeping with people to manipulate them. She was genuinely attracted to certain leaders, and those relationships carried a world-changing effect. There are some people for whom it is like that. I suspect that certain Pluto-Venus aspects, when they are mitigated by the sextile and by the trine, are political relationships. Okay, Pluto is politics, and it's politics and finances, and Venus is relations. As a native Pluto opposition Venus, I noticed that in times of hard Pluto transits, I attracted to my life people whose Pluto either trined or sextile my Pluto. I'm not saying it was always the easiest, but I understand the political connection with this. And when you tend to willing consent, you sort of not only your own relational stuff, but also political conflicts. And it ain't for nothing that me recovering from those type of unhealthy stuff, I found myself doing more and more politics and having actual teachings and actual answers that are more realistic, not gaslighting, and actual, like, I want to imagine this. Okay, so willing consent is a very important thing also from the utility and the development of the race, and biodiversity is achieved by willing consent. This is also when, because sometimes you can go for, can marry another clan, but it's kind of like their diseases marry your diseases, and there's nothing wrong with being born with an ailment. It has a purpose, but you will see that if it happens through willing consent, you will be able to contact this purpose and connect with the children way better than if it's through a crisis. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. And willing consent is to all genders. So those are like biodiversity. Willing consent is something that's all across the board, something we need to practice. Abolishing bodily mutilation practices. Okay, I'm not talking about the jewelries. I'm talking about like genitalia mutilation or stuff like that. Abolishing child sacrifice rituals, stuff like that, because, like, hey, we can proceed from there without losing the connection to our traditions. Even if we look at our own life, there are things we did when we were younger. They were like, oh my gosh, that was not something I'd do. So imagine the generations. And yet there are things that I didn't think they were so good, but now that I think about this actually has a point there. And it's through this that we develop the richness of life, which I talked about when I talked about biodiversity, and we can let go of the fear of assimilation, okay? Because Jews fear assimilation so much. They fear assimilation, the Orthodox Jews. And I have a Facebook friend who, before the war, she has two sons. That the father was a big person in the Haredi Gur Hasidim, and he happened to have been a pedo. Okay, he was violating her, but also began to violate the children. So she wanted to take the children out from his violation. She was tested 7 times psychiatrically. They found nothing. Okay, and because he's so well connected, it's very difficult to just save the children. And it happened in a person who was already, Hasidic, Gur Jewish. And that's just horror. So it's like you fear assimilation because you fear the habits of others, but you end up performing horrors. And so you did not assimilate. So you assimilated without interracial marriages. Okay, and so I think we should not be so afraid of assimilation. If you look at Maimonides, he was inspired by Sufi Muslim philosophers and thinkers, and the pillars of our Judaism are embedded with Islam, and that's just how it goes. It happened through exile, but if we were not fearing assimilation so much, so we could think and learn from other religions and not just leave it to the Illuminati or to the Freemasons or to like patriarchal cult that have their own changes that are needed. And that's also a part of the changes that need to happen. If we leave it, if we don't respect each other's religions and think together, then somebody's going to do it, but they're going to be a cult. They're going to be a secret society, and having to hide yourself creates all kinds of degenerative habits. Okay, think about the tribe that have to hide their origin. So they have to marry within each other. Now they are forced to generation. They're not to blame for that. But hey, if we become more tolerant, we can become more biodiverse, and then we can let go of those things that don't work for us way easier all the while retrieve actually also ancient species or ancient traditions. If you look at what's happening in astrology, in magic, in occult, a lot of people regain stuff that, like Babylon, Krasiatasi is doing Babylonian astrology. Babylonian! The rise of Hellenistic astrology. Traditional astrology. Who thought? We're in 2023. And so when we are not afraid of assimilation, not only do we not lose tradition, but we actually bring in the old and bring in the new, and we create what is actually fit for our times. So what was successful? Those things I believe were successful. Why did Nelson Mandela did it when other people died? Even they either tried nonviolence and just killed their people with hunger strikes, like mass suicides, or they were like oppressive, like whoever it is in Palestine is painting the flag of the whole. How do you think Arab countries look at Palestinian people painting the entire region of Palestina with one flag? And what do you think they believe that Palestinians are thinking about Jordan, about Syria, about Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar? Okay, why would they stop at Israel? So what would it comes across as very imperialist. Okay, and what do you think people who are actually looking to live in Latvia? I'm sure there are a lot of Palestinians who are worried about having another passport and really worried about what happened when there would be Palestine. If so, it's heading Schwabland, but it's like, if so, because who wants to live in a country where the regime beheads babies and participates in street lynches? And how can you say I'm a Palestinian refugee when there is no Israel? Okay, so you need both the internal stuff to be there and the external stuff to allow for it. And the juncture between the internal and external is creating the friction that leads into change, but it's also an internal change in as much as it is external change. Okay, in no way is apartheid justified. That being said, if there would be hereditary kingship and the generation of the race by interracial, intertribal marriages, it would head worse. It would head to extinction. So I'm not going to continue this episode further on. There's a lot more to look at. I'm really fascinated with the persona and the circumstances and the whole story of the liberation from apartheid by Mandela and the intricacy of it. And it helps me to cope with the spirit of the times. So I hope you find this useful, and whatever respectful input that you have, then I'm also able to be educated, because as you see, I know nothing about this. So thank you for watching.